In 1978, a nuclear submarine descended into an obscure canyon in the North Atlantic and transmitted one final panic message: "Our instruments aren't breaking, they're being absorbed." Within seconds, all 5 of their sonar systems went completely dead, and the water temperature outside dropped 30 degrees in a single second. What naval researchers discovered when they sent a deep-sea probe down to investigate the acoustic void would challenge everything we know about the ocean floor. The North Atlantic is full of secrets. But 300 miles off the coast of an isolated island chain lies a geographical rift known in classified logs simply as Sector 4G. It is an underwater canyon over 4 miles deep. Steep, jagged walls of dark basalt drop into complete blackness. Under normal conditions, a submarine relies on active sonar. The vessel emits an acoustic pulse, a ping. That sound wave travels through the ocean, hits an object, and bounces back. It is the eye of the submarine in the pitch-black deep. When the nuclear submarine USS Ark Heron entered Sector 4G during a routine patrol, the crew initiated a standard active sonar sweep. The ping echoed out into the dark. Then, nothing. No bounce. No echo. No reflection from the canyon walls. It was as if the canyon itself had swallowed the sound wave whole. The sonar technician checked the computer readouts. The system had locked up. Seconds later, the backup passive hydrophones, sensors designed to listen to the ocean's ambient noise, flickered off. The baseline hum of the ocean, the sound of distant whale calls, the crackle of snapping shrimp vanished. The audio monitors went dead silent. The captain ordered an immediate turn back to open water. But as the submarine rotated, the navigation displays began to fail. Digital depth meters read 0. Magnetic compasses spun out of control. The submarine was moving blind inside a dark abyss, stripped of every sensory system on board. They managed to blow the ballast tanks and surface on manual emergency controls. Upon returning to port, engineers pulled the submarine's multi-million-dollar sonar domes apart. The equipment wasn't damaged by water or pressure. The quartz crystals inside the transducers had been rendered inert. Their atomic structures had been altered, as if subjected to an acoustic force far beyond modern science. Naval intelligence stepped in. They quarantined the submarine and sealed the logs. But they couldn't ignore the canyon. What could turn off military-grade acoustic sensors in a fraction of a second? Investigators first proposed a simple, natural explanation: extreme thermal inversion. Scientists argued that hyperdense layers of ice-cold water sitting beneath warm currents could create a refractive barrier, a climax layer. In theory, sound waves hitting this layer at a precise angle would bend away, failing to return to the submarine. It was an elegant physical explanation. It satisfied the civilian oceanographers. So, in the summer of 1981, the Navy deployed a specialized oceanography vessel, the USNS Bartlett, to test the thermal hypothesis. They lowered heavy thermistor chains and ultra-high-frequency acoustic transducers directly into the trench. They prepared to ping the canyon wall at maximum power. Pattern interrupt, static heartbeat audio drop, but the strangest part was still to come. As the hydrophone array crossed the boundary depth of 2,000 meters, the temperature sensors didn't show a smooth transition layer. Instead, the water temperature plunged instantaneously from 12 degrees Celsius to -2 degrees, water so cold it should have frozen solid, yet remained liquid under intense pressure. The technicians triggered the active ping at 100,000 watts of acoustic power. A sound loud enough to disorient sea life for miles. On the monitors, the sound wave traveled down toward the canyon floor. The moment it crossed the cold layer, the signal line went flat. Not refracted. Not scattered. Completely neutralized. Even worse, the hydrophones lowered below. The layer stopped transmitting telemetry. When the crew reeled the cables back to the surface, the thick steel line was intact, but the titanium-housed sensors at the end had turned icy cold. The internal components were intact, but every magnetic core had been entirely demagnetized. Thermal refraction couldn't demagnetize solid-state electronics. The inversion theory was dead. Investigators moved to a second hypothesis: rare methane hydrate venting. Geologists argued that massive pockets of methane gas trapped beneath the sea floor might be leaking into the canyon. A continuous column of microscopic gas bubbles rising through the water column could diffuse acoustic waves, acting like a soundproof blanket underwater. Furthermore, high concentrations of gas could disrupt electromagnetic equipment. To test this, the research team lowered a heavily armored remotely operated vehicle equipped with low-light cameras and chemical sensors. They needed visual proof of gas plumes. The ROV sank slowly into the abyss. At 1,500 meters, the ocean light turned to black. The ROV's powerful halogen lamps cut through the water, revealing the smooth basalt walls of the canyon. As it passed the 3,000-meter mark, the video feed began to warp. The camera showed no gas bubbles, no clouds of silt, no hydrothermal vents emitting gas. The water was unnaturally crystal clear. Too clear. There were no organic particles floating in the water column, no ocean snow, no plankton, no life whatsoever. The water inside the canyon was entirely sterile. Then, the ROV reached the wall of the canyon. The lights shone upon the basalt rock. The geologists in the control room leaned closer to the screens. Basalt from underwater volcanic eruptions is naturally rough, jagged, and porous. But the canyon walls of Sector 4G were unnaturally smooth. They appeared polished, almost glassy, running down into the darkness at precise, uniform angles. Suddenly, the ROV's mechanical arm jerked. The telemetry screen flashed a warning: system overload. The video feed didn't cut to static. Instead, the image on the screen inverted. The dark water turned blindingly white, and the dark basalt rock turned clear as glass. For 3 seconds, the camera captured something moving beneath the surface of the glassy rock. Then, the cable went slack. The 2-ton ROV detached and vanished into the canyon floor. Pattern interrupt, high-tension drone. The gas theory had collapsed. There were no bubbles. No vents. Just an impossible geological structure that erased electronics and swallowed research gear. The Navy was out of standard explanations. They turned to an old, discarded branch of acoustic physics: phase cancellation. What if the sound wasn't being absorbed? What if something inside the trench was sending a signal back? In physics, if a sound wave meets an identical sound wave that is precisely 180 degrees out of phase, the two waves destroy each other. The result is absolute, unadulterated silence. Active noise-canceling headphones use this exact principle. But to cancel a submarine sonar in real time, an acoustic source would need to receive the incoming ping, compute its exact frequency and amplitude, and generate an inverted wave instantaneously. It was impossible. The processing power required to cancel a 100,000-watt sound wave in real time underwater did not exist in the 1980s. To test this terrifying possibility, the team constructed a purely mechanical experiment. No computers. No electrical chips. No digital sensors that could be fried. They built a heavy steel bathysphere containing an analog clockwork reel-to-reel tape recorder connected to a purely mechanical hydrophone. It operated entirely on springs, gears, and magnetic tape. They lowered the mechanical recorder into Sector 4G. What the acoustic team heard on that tape made the top naval brass shut down the operation immediately. The bathysphere remained in the dark canyon for 4 hours before being winched back to the deck of the ship. The acoustic team retrieved the physical tape, brought it into the audio lab, and placed it on a deck. They pressed play. For the first 20 minutes, there was only the low mechanical hum of the clockwork gears. Then, at the exact moment the bathysphere crossed the 3,000-meter depth threshold, a sound emerged from the tape. It was not silence. It was a continuous, rhythmic pulse. A low-frequency hum that cycled every 3 seconds. The audio engineers ran the analog recording through an oscilloscope. The wave pattern was unnaturally perfect, a mathematical sine wave that does not exist in nature. As they analyzed the recording further, they made a chilling discovery. The hum was not randomly oscillating. It was modifying its frequency every time the surface ship moved its engines. The canyon was not an empty acoustic dead zone. It was listening. It was analyzing every artificial sound made by human technology, matching the frequency, and emitting a perfect phase-inverted wave to erase the noise. When the submarine USS Ark Heron had pinged the canyon in 1978, the trench hadn't broken its instruments. It had matched its acoustic signature so precisely that the submarine's sensors were overwhelmed by an exact mirror of their own energy. In 1994, the Navy launched one final classified expedition to map the floor of Sector 4G using deep-diving human submersibles. 2 pilots descended into the void inside a reinforced titanium hull. They crossed the dead layer. Their digital instruments failed on schedule, forcing them onto manual oxygen and analog gauges. They turned on the external floodlights. As they reached the canyon floor at 5,000 meters, the lights revealed the bottom. It was not sediment. It was not rock. The floor of the canyon was a massive, seamless trench of non-reflective black material, stretching for miles in perfect straight lines. Lined along the edges were giant, vertical geometric structures, half buried in the earth, absorbing 99% of all light and sound that touched them. The pilots reported feeling a massive, low-frequency vibration inside their chests, a sound they couldn't hear with their ears, but felt in their bones. Before they could take a physical sample, the submersible's backup battery systems began draining at 10% per second. The pilots abandoned the operation and executed an emergency ballast drop, shooting back toward the light of the surface. Shortly after that final dive, the military sealed all records regarding Sector 4G. The nautical coordinates were scrubbed from civilian maps, marked simply as unsurveyed shoal, dangerous navigation. Official oceanographic databases list the missing instruments and